Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to speak about a little project of mine, the Action Simulator. My name is Volker Fröhlich. Some of you may know me by the name of Volker. That's my nickname on IRC. I work for the Geizhals company. That's a company running a website doing price comparison on all kinds of products. In my past time, I'm a Fedora package maintainer, also the Zabbix package maintainer there, and I'm collecting data for the OpenStreetMap project. When it comes to Zabbix, you may have used one or two of the front-end patches I developed over the years, and the Action Simulator is actually one of those patches we're going to talk about right now. If you have attended this conference in 2013, you should recognize those slides, or maybe if you watched the videos, about how many of you do. That's surprisingly few. Right, so I'll try to explain the basics, because this is actually a repetition of this topic. So the focus will be on how this patch is still very, very useful in Zabbix today, 3 years later, and what I have developed since. I can't go into the technical details here, because it's just a short talk. But you may want to watch the old video and make sure to turn on the auto-generated subtitles, because they are hilarious and sometimes dirty. Right. A brief introduction to the Action Simulator. It's hard to explain the Action Simulator without using the words events, condition, evaluation, expression all over the place, but I'll give it a try. The Action Simulator is telling you which actions apply if an event occurs. And as a consequence, which operations will be conducted, meaning which notifications will be sent out, which remote commands are attempted to be run. And that's the most important part if you ask me, it will also explain which of them did not happen and why. I can barely imagine operating Zabbix without using the Action Simulator. That may sound selfish, but I mean it. It really gives you a peace of mind if you know what's going on. Let's say you're setting up a trigger and you're setting up an action. And that's two distinct things, actually. It's not directly connected, and you just hope to get everything right. And if you're the head of monitoring in your company, for instance, you want to make it really sure. I can sleep very well knowing everything is going to work as I had designed it. It just helps you to not ridicule yourself by sending duplicate notifications, and you can't figure out where they're actually coming from. And sometimes actions would work and sometimes not, and it's really tricky to debug. And that's what the Action Simulator is trying to do. There's something missing here. Right. So in 2013, I was using 2.0. That's the version I developed it for. I later ported it to 2.2, and then there was a long break. That was due to various changes in 2.4, and most prominently, and a very important feature I greatly appreciate, you could suddenly use custom action condition expressions, giving you a lot of flexibility, but that would not fit the way I did the Action Simulator, so I delayed the work and delayed it and delayed it. And all of a sudden I got a contribution from a Russian called Mikhail Oktoin, and he submitted a working patch for 3.0, and that's what finally got me started on development again. I think most setups really rely on actions. I think the fewest people are sitting there staring at the dashboard all day. I mean, how many of you are having more than one action? In how many setups do you have just super users? That's really rare, and so you run into all kinds of permission issues and various actions that may intersect with what they do. It can become really complex, and as I said before, Zabbix has no direct connection between a trigger and what we actually want to do in the case of an event. You can guess from the number Zabbix 97, Zabbix Next 97, that is a fairly old ticket that is actually 7 years old. Asking for just that, trying to figure out what's going on if an event happens. You may ask yourself, well, we've got the action audit log, not to be mistaken for the audit log, where you can see what was going on and who was notified and which action caused the notification. And that is true, and it is a suitable tool to debug your issues, but in hindsight. Something already must have happened to see anything there, and what is more, you can only see information concerning the operations. You would never figure out why an action was not considered to be run looking at the action audit log. The way I implemented it is not ideal because it involves code replication and it is slow. What I did is implementing the server logic that is responsible for processing events, running through the actions, running through the operations in PHP as good as I could. I'm not a developer, but it's working. And it's actually not that bad because it's implemented as an API method to the actions class, actions.run, so you could potentially even use it in a script. And what is very important to understand about the action simulator is it doesn't actually do something. That's what I was trying to emphasize with the name simulator. It's not actually sending notifications. It's only going to open a view that will tell you what's going on. And when it comes to the user interface, the only change to the original user interface is this one additional column to the far right here. That's the list of triggers configured for a host, and there's the column actions, and it has those buttons next to each line. And if you click the button, a pop-up will open, and this pop-up will give you the information on this very trigger, assuming to strike at this very time. Don't try to read this, it's very small. I'll just try to explain what the pop-up looks like. This is a small version, actually. If you're having a lot of actions and a lot of operations going on, this will be a lengthy view. But it contains a four sections. The topmost section contains information about the trigger. You may know most of it already from where you've been before. And it contains some forms to adjust what you're going to simulate, but I cannot go into details there. Please refer to the video if you're interested. And then there's two blocks. The two blocks are what's going on in terms of notifications. The one below is what is going on in terms of remote commands. And the bottom table helps you debug action conditions. I picked this order because you're usually interested in the result, and just if something goes wrong, you scroll down trying to figure out what went wrong there. Here are a couple of simple scenarios the action simulator allows you to do. One of them is the area of finding configuration errors. You may have wrong action conditions which make your actions apply when you don't expect it, or the other way around. You may have missing permissions for a user to access a host, which results in not getting notifications. You might have gotten his media settings wrong. You may not have defined an email address, for instance, for a user. And the very common case of duplicate messages can be tracked down very easily with this tool. And the other use case I can think of is if your superior came to you and would ask you for a list of notifications that would be sent out for a particular host, for instance, you can easily generate this list using the API. This is supposed to be an example from the bottom table where we're looking at an action and its condition. What we can see here is an action with 4 conditions, and those conditions are end connected. And you can see that the first 3 apply, and those little colored boxes go 1 row each. So you can see that A corresponds to this line, B, next line, and so on. The overall result of the action is false, that's because the last part of it is wrong. That's the trigger name that I was using there. And since the last condition is on trigger name and doesn't match, we take a closer look and we find that there's a little typo. And that is very easy to spot this way. To prove that the action simulator actually supports the expression type as well, I put up this example here with custom brackets and ors and and as you like them to have. You can see here that it doesn't mean a thing if a condition goes wrong for the overall result, of course, because if there is an OR connection, that's absolutely feasible. And what goes at the bottom of this debugging table is disabled actions. And this is very important, as Rehart's already pointed out today, because an action can simply go disabled without further notice due to you deleting something. And that's a caption from the notifications box of the pop-up window. I picked out this part, made a bigger copy below. What you can see in the upper table is one line each for each notification attempt, I would say, and when it's going to happen and why it's going to happen, basically. And on the far right, you can see there are red boxes. We've got 4 lines here, and we actually have 3 configuration failures in here. The first one is a duplicate message. User B, no, sorry, it's user A. User A is scheduled to be sent emails twice on the same issue and at the same time. That's because it was configured to be to the user directly, but who is also part of a user group, so that automatically overlaps, of course. And then we've got another user who is part of the user group, but he cannot receive this notification because he has no permissions to the host. And my workflow would usually be, I would open the pop-up, put it on one side of the screen, have the Zabbix interface on the other side of the screen, just go through the problems, fix them, refresh the view until everything is just like I want it to be. Yeah, and the third error I was talking about is user A eventually would not receive anything because nobody defined an email address for him, so that needs to be fixed as well. Right. So if you know the 2013 version of the Action Simulator, not much had changed for the first version I published in June for 3.0. It couldn't handle the expression-based condition types. And it still had the very ugly design of a debug table that it used to have before. And here you can see a direct comparison. The upper table is the old design that was really poor. It was hard to read, and it was even impossible to read for colorblind people. And it was a bad design anyway, and it would not have worked with custom expressions. And that's why I designed the lower one, which is basically like a block in a table for every action, and has this symbolic spelling of the expression with A, B, and C and D. And it also resolves most, not all, of the properties. You can just see the raw IDs in the upper table. And most of them resolve now, so it's pretty easy to read as well. Other improvements were in the notifications part. The column names now pretty much match what you can find everywhere else in the front end. And this information on the far right used to occupy like 3 columns, and now it's a lot more compact. And then there is the button that I showed you in the very beginning that leads you to this pop-up that I now added to disabled triggers as well. I didn't do that in the first place because I thought it was useless. It wouldn't send anything anyway. But on the other hand, I came to the conclusion, what if I could create a trigger and leave it disabled in the first place and just try to figure out what it would do if it were enabled? So I'm not running the risk of sending notifications I don't want, and I can build up what I want and just flip a switch and activate it. And this idea could be drawn much further. I could enter a custom trigger text that just change the severity, not running the risk of changing the behavior, updating a whole template, which would take us very long. I may introduce that in the future. But after all, as useful as it is to me, it remains a hack. It belongs somewhere else. It either belongs into a separate API part, separate API component, or it belongs into the server code just because it is more efficient. There's not the risk of implementing new bugs where it just wouldn't sync. And as we have heard this morning, 3.2 introduces yet more changes. So we still have to code that too. Right. There's a reference. I'll lead you to a brief article about the action simulator. The lower one is to the changelog, where you can figure out what has happened in the new version. And I would love to welcome everybody of you who isn't on Freenode IRC to our Zabbix channel, which is a very supportive place. Thank you to the developers that are in this channel. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Any questions?
Do you know how many people have tried out the new action simulator since the almost secret release?
Probably none. Well, I didn't tell anybody. I just wanted to
okay,
let
well,
it
now we have
explode
told,
here.
hopefully.
Yes,
so
now everybody
get better.
knows. But there's a couple of downloads on all versions, like every other week, from all around the world. And I know a couple of companies that are using it in production.
Hello. I would like to confirm that this is one of the biggest problems we have in our installation, because we have a lot of users. And this, the main problem they have is that why the action is not working, or why am I getting so much? So it will be great to get something like this in Zabbix core, so we don't have to patch or run.
I agree, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it would be fantastic. It's it will be a great functionality in core. Yeah.
If it's just for me not having to maintain it.
Yeah.
Okay, I see no more questions, so thank you very much.